From earning $1.25 an hour to founding a multi-billion-dollar fast food chain. If I were to ask you to name the largest restaurant franchise in the world, you'd probably say something along the lines of McDonald's, Burger King, or Wendy's, or maybe even something else. But in all actuality, the answer is none other than yours truly, Subway. In today's video, I'll take you through their entire journey to becoming the largest food franchise in the world, which is ranked as the 92nd most valuable brand. If you're new to the channel, welcome to Business Unmasked, where we unmask the stories behind interesting and successful companies. Hit the like button so more people can hear stories like these, and subscribe if you aren't already subscribed. Now let's get to the unmasking. Now, to start from the very beginning of Subway's history, we would have to go back to October 3rd, 1943, the day Fred A. DeLuca was born to a poor family in Brooklyn, New York. His father, Salvador DeLuca, was a factory worker and earned just enough to make ends meet, whereas his mother, Carmela DeLuca, was a housewife. A few years later, they moved to Amsterdam, New York, where 10-year-old Fred grew to love medicine. However, when the time came for college, they weren't able to pay his fees. But Fred, coming from a very poor family, was always taught to fend for himself. So, as an alternative, he looked for ways to pay his own way through college. He soon got a job working in a hardware store and earned $1.25 per hour. He knew there was no way he could pay his fee with such a minimal amount, as his meager wages would not last him long. He had to think of another way. It was a hot summer afternoon. The sun was shining bright in New York City. Fred and his family were headed to their close family friend and a successful nuclear scientist, Dr. Peter Buck's house, for a barbecue. Fred was there only with one intention. He wanted to ask Dr. Buck for a loan of $1,000. But fortunately for Fred, instead of giving him the tuition he needed, Peter decided to invest the money into Fred's first sandwich shop in 1965, with the simple advice to use the business to pay his way through college. Now, Fred had very limited job experience. He had a paper route as a kid and a job at the local hardware store as a teenager, but that was it. So when Peter offered him a business, Fred was surprised but didn't let his inexperience stop him. For what he lacked in business savvy, he made up for with enthusiasm and took up the offer. Little did he know that this decision would set his life on a very different path. He would soon not only have the means to pay his tuition and then some, but would also become an inspiration to many other people around the world. Fred continued his education while growing the chain of restaurants. Originally planning on being a medical doctor, Fred later graduated from the University of Bridgeport in 1971 with a degree in psychology. As Fred and Peter prepared to open the doors to Pete's Super Submarines, they carved a phrase into the entrance: "Think big." They then started prepping for the day ahead, cutting some veggies and subs, keeping the quantity and expectations to the minimum. It was around 9:35 a.m. when a little girl rode her bicycle near the store, stopped and walked in, ordering the very first sandwich. 10 minutes later, Fred left towards his university in a rush to take his English exam. And when he returned hours later, there was a line outside the store. At first, he couldn't believe the sight. There was a huge crowd waiting to taste the new dish in town. It was the first day and they had already sold all the 312 breads that they had. As the day settled, they sat down on the sidewalk and said, "Hey, we're rich." Even though they weren't, they were just staying afloat, but they knew they were onto something big. Since then, they watched their pennies very carefully, learning through the school of hard knocks. And after 6 months of business, the store started losing money. People didn't know them and they couldn't do much to draw attention. Even as things got harsher, they persevered and fought to push through. A few months later, their first full summer of business came to an end and they were left with a mere $6 in their bank account. Through it, all their family and friends remained supportive, but they did suggest shutting the failing business down. Now, while a normal person would listen to that advice and start anew, Fred DeLuca was anything but normal. Instead of quitting, he opened up a second shop fairly close to the first and tried to change things around for the better. At the time, they had 4 vendors. Fred and his mother always drove around and visited every Friday, forming a bond that helped Fred gain the footing he needed. The vendors liked them and they got them the money time to time and were honest about the business. They also extended the credit to Fred when needed. It was because of them that they were able to expand to 4 more locations and earn the trust of the customers with the motto, "Eat fresh." Meanwhile, the company had its first employee meeting to discuss their marketing strategies. Peter and Fred agreed upon changing the name of the store to Subway. Peter then suggested that the word sub could be of one color and the way another. The 5th store was significantly better and bigger than the first 4. Simply put, it was a moneymaker, soon acting as a point of stability for the brand. Fred learned the basics of running a business and the importance of serving well-made, high-quality products, providing excellent customer service, keeping operating costs low, and finding great locations. By 1973, they had opened 16 locations, having a total of 32 stores. With little money to expand, they needed to make a big decision: open up the brand to franchising. Mainly because they were not growing at the pace they needed and the stores they had were too far away to keep a constant eye on themselves. Being new to the model, both of them had no idea where to start or what to do. Fortunately, Fred asked a friend, Brian Dixon, to become the first Subway franchisee, but the offer was declined instantly. Brian already had a job with good pay and wasn't willing to give that up at the time. The day Brian changed his mind was the day Subway changed as well. Fred rented office space and began advertising the availability of franchise locations in the area. The response was immediate and steady. By early 1975, the company expanded into New York and Massachusetts. In 1977, Fred received an inquiry from brothers Jim and Jerry Smith of Baltimore to open restaurants there. By 1982, there were more than 300 locations in 30 states. Along with the expansion, new items were added to their menu, including the chain's flagship sandwich, the BMT, named after the Brooklyn Manhattan Transit System, and the smaller snack sub, which is known today as the 6-inch. But it wasn't until the introduction of freshly baked bread in 1983 that set Subway itself apart from its competitors. Subway opened its first international location in 1984 in the small country of Bahrain. With that, more countries heard about the new kickstarting international expansion, wanting to be a part of it. At this point, the franchise already had annual sales of over $60 million by 1993. There were over 1,100 active stores in the United States, which was 300 more than McDonald's at the time, progressing further in 1998. Just 5 years later, Subway officially opened its 10,000th restaurant, making it one of the fastest growing franchises of that time. DeLuca passed away at 67 just weeks after the 50th anniversary of Subway. 2 years before, he had been diagnosed with leukemia and was scaling back on his leadership role at the company. Even after his death, the future looks bright for sub-regional offices around the world. From its humble beginnings as the mom-and-pop shop known as Peter's Super Submarines, Subway has made a lasting mark on the restaurant industry. After all these years, it's still a family business, owned and operated by thousands of individual family franchisees around the world. It's been 55 years now since the first Subway was opened. 55 years of much-deserved success. For a 17-year-old kid just trying to find his way through college, it's easier said than done, but who among us these days has the spirit of this young boy? Let us know what you think of the story of Subway in the comment section.
If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. It does wonders for the YouTube algorithm, so more people can see our videos and so that you can be notified when we launch our next video. We try and put out at least one new one per week, and as you can imagine, the research and editing alone of these type of videos takes us close to 18 hours. So we would really appreciate it if you could also check out our Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can support our work. We produce over 12 videos per month, so that is literally 8 cents per video. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at our next unmasking.